Churchill. Let's talk about the behaviour of the French Republic in North America, in Algeria. Let's talk about Italy's behaviour in Abyssinia. Let's talk about Germans' behaviour towards the Jews. I mean, European behaviour, the most sophisticated and culturally advanced people on earth, like Germany or Britain, has been absolutely appalling when it comes to war. They have not had any regard for the Geneva Convention. They simply exterminated their enemies in practice on an industrial scale, literally, get to Germany.
Yeah.
So when you nitpick about the possible interpretation of what happened to, and you use the kind of the Western mores argument over against Islam, I just smell double standards, big double standards.
But I'm not seeking to defend any particular government though. I feel like
but you
the
said
world
Western
would
mores. You said Western mores.
Yeah. So one particular example would be kind of in terms of taking slaves. Even if you say, oh well, you're the master is obliged to allow them to buy their own freedom. You have to ask, if you were a child who was taken slave, why should you be obligated to buy your own freedom when you weren't part of the attack? You weren't part of the kind of tribe's decision to attack the Muslims.
Yeah, I think this is all a bit red herring, because the ulama, that is the collective scholars of Islam in the late 19th century onwards, have decided collectively that slavery, as you call it, has no place in Islam anymore, because Islam doesn't depend on slavery as an institution. It doesn't promote it. It's not part. If Islam disappears tomorrow from the earth, Islam is a fully functioning system. It doesn't depend on slavery.
Yeah.
It's something that existed. It's something that existed at the time of Muhammad. It was legislated for and dealt with in ways which ultimately led to its abolition. As the Quran says on many occasions, free slaves. It's a good work to free slaves. And the Quran is all about having faith and doing good works. You're supposed to constantly do good works by freeing slaves. It doesn't say enslave people, it says free the slaves. So you can see the institution really was being subverted from within, and scholars did reach this conclusion a while ago, that it was no longer part of the world we live in. So I think this is a bit of an anachronistic discussion. It's no longer of real relevance to the way Muslim scholars see things today. But I would, given that the balance of power in the world now lies with the West, with America and Britain and so on, these are the people who invade Muslim countries. We're doing it as we speak. We're still in Afghanistan. Was it 16 years after we invaded that country? We're still in Iraq, despite the fact we apparently left it. We're still there. We're still bombing and occupying Syria and so on in the Middle East. It's not Syria that's invading us. It's not Saudi Arabia that's invading London. It's not Afghanistan that's on the beaches of Texas. It's us in their beaches, in their towns, and their cities. So I think if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about what's really going on, and that is the Western obsession with intervening, invading, bombing, killing, for oil, for a neocon agenda, for Israel's own geopolitical purposes, and we support brutal regimes. We support the Sisi regime in Egypt. Sorry, mate, you support Egypt, but Sisi is a brutal guy, and we support him with arms. America does. Yeah. We support Israel. In my view, it's a terrorist state. It terrorizes the Palestinians. It enslaves them in compounds called Gaza. It's wiping out their homes in the West Bank. It's ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people from the face of Palestine.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about Western mores, let's talk about that, because we're financing this. We are. The American government finances Israel to the tune of trillions of dollars, more than all the other foreign aid combined on earth. The Israeli budget is bigger than that. So we prop up these regimes.
Yeah, I grant you that. You
so
can
when we
make
talk
lots
about Western mores, I would throw the question back at you and say, what Western? It'd be nice if there were some Western mores instead of this power grab, oil grab, geopolitical grab.
I was using that to refer to the particular kind of issue of slavery and what the Sahaba did.
But this is a minuscule issue compared to the civilization that you are advocating over again. against this alleged behaviour. And I think we need to put the question where the power really lies today, and that is in the regimes that are supported by America and by Britain and finance and arm. Look what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen, for example. We're supplying weapons to... Anyway, didn't get to say anything. Right, I'll shut up then.
Okay.
End of speech.
No, that's okay. Like, I feel kind of like, it's good.
Do you have any response? Because you were coming to me with, well, our Western mores are this and they're great, and your Islamic behaviour is, by implication, bad. But when we look at these Western mores, they have a terrible track record, even within our own living memory.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what you are defending.
Okay. I definitely don't want to defend any particular kind of government or foreign policy. No, more kind of, I think, kind of institutions like the United Nations. I would kind of defend that over kind of, I know, the Rashidun Caliphate, for example, or the Umayyad Caliphate.
Okay, you seem to want to compare and contrast to.
They are totally different time periods. But if like I sometimes hear people saying like the example and lessons and the rules given down by the Prophet and the example of the Sahaba are the best possible way for mankind to live for all time.
I would defend that absolutely, yes. Should we talk about freedom of religion? Comparing it today.
Yeah,
I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, I'll let you, because I've been criticised for talking too much. It's a good point. I think the Islamic, from that time, and in theory, in the Quran and the Sunnah, is much more advanced when it comes to freedom of religion than the current Western model.
Okay, so...
I would defend that here and now.
Okay, so...
Would you want to start by saying how ridiculous that is?
Yeah, okay. Do you defend how it's agreed in all four surviving branches of Sunni fiqh that the penalty for a Muslim leaving Islam or converting to another religion is imprisonment and then death?
Okay. Is that your argument?
Yeah, I'm asking, is that one of the things you're defending?
Okay, I'll just say what I'm defending before I come on to that particular point. In an Islamic system, which doesn't exist particularly, I don't think. You should get another.
I've got to swap it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Islamic societies at their best, and we have an example of that in Medina under the Prophet Muhammad, are inherently pluralist, but more so than say Britain is today. And I'll explain what I mean. In Britain today, there's a lot of hysteria about Sharia law, creeping Sharia. Yeah. I mean, there it is creeping along here. There's a lot of Sharia is overwhelmingly to do with, I don't know, inheritance. It's to do with marriage. It's to do with property. It's to do with, only a tiny amount is to do with the hudud punishments. The criminal side of the law. The vast majority is to do with just living a life, praying, fasting, whatever. But the Sharia is very clear that other faith communities, say Christians and Jews, have the right under Sharia in law to live their lives as they wish, according to their own rules and regulations. So if Christians want to marry according to their own Catholic rules, they want to divorce, they want to inherit, they want to eat pork and gamble and drink booze, or whatever Christians do these days, according to the regulations, that in Sharia is absolutely protected by law. Same for the Jews. The Jews can go to their best, their marriage court, their tribunals, and marriage, divorce, inheritance. In this country now, there are active moves to suppress all of this for Muslims. Muslims can't even get married in mosques. I mean, married in the legal sense. They have to go to registry office. So we're not Muslims are very constrained about what we're allowed to do in terms of governing our lives by our own rules. Because people, politicians say, there's one rule for everyone, one law for everyone. But in Islamic society, actually, there is multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Actually, so Jews can have their own rules and live by them. Christians have their own rules and live by them. Same for the Zoroastrians, same for the Sikhs, same for the Hindus, same for whatever. And we're not all just following one rules, one size fits all. So actually, the Islamic system is more pluralist. It will allow Muslims by right to adjudicate according to their own rules about inheritance and marriage and so on. The pressure now is to close these things down. You read the Daily Mail, you read the MPs in the House of Lords. They want this stopped. They want it stopped. It is being stopped in France, in Germany. It's very dodgy. In the West in general, it's really in America, it's really tough. So Islam is much more pluralist, yeah? So that's the big context I wanted to make. As regards freedom of religion in
I think that was the first thing you said, whether there was more freedom of religion in
but that's what I meant. When I meant freedom of religion, I mean the freedom to live your religion.
Not the freedom to change your religion, though.
I'll come to that in a second. What I'm talking about is the freedom to live your religion. It's not like a private thing where I just pray to God. It's living it in a social sense. In Islam, you're allowed to do that fully if you're a Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim, obviously, or whatever, or a people of the book, whatever you are. But in Christianity, you're also supposed to obey the law of the land, which is basically the Christian Roman law, and everyone's supposed to obey that without any kind of adjustments made to Jews and Christians.
Before we get on to
so that was my bigger point.
Okay. Do you see a downside to that? For example, when there were Muslim leaders of India, they allowed the Hindu practice where it was, oh hey there.
Hey Jamie,
oh, you remember my name?
Of course I do.
Yeah. So
Forget a face like that. Anyway, carry on. Don't interrupt.
I didn't have the hat last time. No.
Okay.
But sorry.
Head for hats. I never forget a face.
You got a head for hats.
I've got a hat. I've got a hat.
No.
Sorry, you were saying about India.
Yeah. So do you see the downside to being too pluralist and not having one rule of law of the land for all? In that Muslim rulers of India did allow the Hindu traditional practice of sati, obliging a widow to throw herself on the funeral pyre of her husband.
Yeah. And that was a practice that was outlawed by, or tried to be outlawed by the British. Enough.
Not the Muslim rulers before though. They allowed that.
I think you mentioned four schools. There are four schools of Sunni law, Sunni fiqh, and there are differences of opinion about how because. Here we go.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
This guy's obsessed with a man who lived 2,000 years ago. He won't worship a man who worshipped God. Jesus said, "May thy will, not mine, be done." And he worships the man who worshipped God.
You don't need to be a Trinitarian to be a Christian, though.
I agree.
Yeah. But anyway,
but no, he's a hardcore type. So there are different opinions because I mentioned the different self-regulatory communities, but there is above that Islamic law. So it's not if I was a Christian and I decided to murder my wife, I mean, I'm not going to get away with it and just say, "Oh, it's a Christian practice." You know, I'll be taken up for murder.
So there is a kind of law of the land.
But to give you another example, on the Zoroastrian people, because historically they have been allowed to marry their sisters. A sister can marry her brother, her literal blood brother, and a brother can marry his sister. And this was something that was permitted under Islamic rule because it was their Sharia, their practice. But the practice of sati, I need to look into that because I expect there were different opinions on that, whether or not we should allow that or not.
I think historically what happened there was that it was allowed.
Right. But that's a judgment that may be at fault. I mean, I'm not saying that every judgment the Muslims have made is correct.
I brought that up as a kind of counterexample to the idea that it's definitely best to allow each religious community to decide.
There are limits to that because, as I said, if a Christian says it's my Christian right to murder my wife because whatever, and it's not going to wash because there's a criminal law that says you can't murder. So I think there is a criminal law which would stop, but I don't know. It's a good question.
So what about the ruling on kind of freedom of religion in terms of converting?
Now we've got the bigger context about how people are free in an Islamic society to rule themselves according to their own religion, which is not always the case. Which is not really the case in the West at the moment, where there are lots of restrictions upon what we can do. When it comes to changing your religion, I think the argument might be that in the earliest centuries, that your allegiance to a particular religion was your allegiance to a state. So if you were to withdraw your allegiance or your faith, or publicly say, "I no longer follow this religion," it was construed then as a treasonable act. So it wasn't like in the West today I have my personal faith and he has his personal faith, and I personally worship Buddha and he personally worships Jesus. No. Allah. It's not like that. It is that you're part of a community, and if you publicly, the idea of public revolt is in the longer version of that hadith. It's not like a private thing. If you publicly go out and you disturb the community by your public revolt from that Christian community, then it becomes a problem. And the thing about the death penalty is interesting because there are a number of examples of Sahaba during the Prophet's lifetime, well, not many examples, a handful of examples, who actually left Islam and some went back to Christianity. And there was one particular Sahaba who not only left Islam, he went back to Christianity and then wrote verses, wrote propaganda, ridiculing the Prophet, Muhammad. He had a change of heart, he repented, he came back, the Prophet, he was forgiven, and do you know what happened to him? He became governor of Egypt. The Prophet appointed him to be governor of Egypt. So I don't know of a single example in the Prophet's own life, I could be wrong, I'm not aware of any examples of anyone who apostatized who was actually executed by Muhammad.
Yeah, I think it's it's hadith, like kind of Bukhari says, oh, I heard the Prophet say, whoever did this, kill him. So it's hadith which, along with kind of the Quran saying kind of, I know, even if we forgive some of you, we punish harshly others. They have incorporated
there's no death penalty
that
for blasphemy or apostasy in the Quran.
Yeah, there isn't mention of the death penalty for that.
So I'm just saying that it's not.
It's become like fiqh in Shafi, Maliki, Hanafi, and Hanbali schools. They do agree that, and they haven't kind of excised it. They haven't like issued a fatwa saying, well, it's no longer kind of part of the historical context for it to make sense for us to do this. There hasn't been a fatwa like there was in the Ottoman Empire for like kind of blanket abolition of slavery and selling of slaves. No. There was a fatwa saying that, but there hasn't been a fatwa saying kind of from now on apostasy doesn't mean changing religion.
No, there have been scholars. There are scholars like Sheikh Atabek is a scholar in north of England. He's a genuine Hanafi scholar, and the Hanafi school has a range of opinions on the death penalty anyway, and he would say there is no death penalty for apostasy. Now, that's based on their particular relationship with Ahad Hadiths. That's a different subject, a technical reason why they don't believe the death penalty for adultery either, or whatever. So there is that view in Islam, but I agree. But I think in the historical context of the earliest centuries, it's different from today. If it was part of seen as a political revolt, part of a treasonable act against the state, then it had that kind of aspect to it, which it doesn't have in today's society. So I would argue it's slight apples and oranges, slightly. But you're right, the four schools in general, the majority view is there is a death penalty. Absolutely. Now, that is what it is. I'm not going to argue against that. It is what it is. But it's there.
Do you think that's moral? Is that good?
But just to say, historically, that's in the Jewish Bible. It's there in the New Testament. It's been part of the greatest Christian theologians like Thomas Aquinas and others did teach this as well.
The Pope isn't saying kind of to do this to apostates, whereas there are kind of schools of clerics who, and the majority opinion is
This is an example where there is a direct clash between Western mores, as you call it, and traditional Islamic teaching. But there is more manoeuvrability within the Sharia than you might think. There are scholars who say it should be imprisonment or it should be fine and not the death penalty. But it is something that is sanctioned. It is condemned.
You earlier you kind of sort of mocked the idea of like Western people being worried about creeping Sharia. But do you think it would be? Do you think it's kind of silly to worry and feel kind of like this is something that that would disturb me if it did become the law of the land, like it is in several kind of Islamic majority states for converting away from Islam to be punishable by death? That is like the actual.
I think that is alarmist rhetoric, because good Muslims, I don't mean modernist liberals or liberal Muslims, I mean good Muslims who are faithful to Islam are not seeking to have Sharia implemented in Britain. That's not our agenda.
What about in 50 or 70 years' time?
Let me explain what the Muslim attitude, as far as I understand it, is in Britain now. The mainstream view is, and the Sharia position is, that if we as Muslims are living in a country that's not Islamic, then our first duty is to be loyal to that society, to respect the authority, respect the government, not to rebel against it, not to attack it. We're to obey the law. Only if it actually directly tells us to do something that's haram in our religion, like Muslims, you must drink alcohol or something, you know. Yeah. And then our duty then is to do hijrah, that is to emigrate to a place on earth where we can live in peace and practice our faith. It's not to fight the government. This is the extremist jihadi rhetoric. That's not Islamic in my view at all. So our duty is to obey the law, be good citizens, to do good works to our neighbours and the poor and everything, uphold the law, and to do dawah, to share, the knowledge about Islam, and that's it. We're not here to transform Britain into an Islamic state. That is a bogeyman of the right, of Islamophobes, of the Daily Mail, whatever. I don't know anyone, any Muslim think, we must go out and spread peeping Sharia. That's not how we think. It's not how we think. Well, but in an Islamic society, i.e. not Britain, an Islamic society where the majority of people are Muslim, freedom of religion is guaranteed for Christians and Jews and Zoroastrians and Hindus, whatever. And they are free to live according to their own rules and regulations. So in Islamic society you can drink alcohol. Muslims can't, but Christians can and Jews can. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but so do you think it would be alarmist rhetoric?
What?
Would it be alarmist rhetoric to consider the possibility that in 70 years' time or 80 years' time that if Muslims did compose, say, 40% of the population, that they might want to vote for a party like the Muslim Brotherhood, and that party might want traditional Sharia and these things to be implemented.
Which is the Muslim Brotherhood? How much do you know about the Muslim Brotherhood?
I don't know, vast amounts. Why is that a bad example?
This is what I think you hear in American political discourse on the right. The Muslim Brotherhood are just terrorists and all this. I mean,
no, I'm not saying they're terrorists. I'm saying
I know, but this is the association. Here's that word. The Muslim Brotherhood doesn't really have a big, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a big presence in this country. It's not something we're not. I don't know. Maybe they do exist, but they're not part of their big movement. The big movement in Egypt were and other parts of the Middle East, but not here. Look, if it so happened that in the next few years, 40% of the British population converted to Islam, and I would say, God willing, and they wanted to regulate their lives more according to God's rule, God's decree, I say fine. That's the will of the people.
Yeah.
What have you got to be afraid of?
A country might be. You might want, for example, your country to be similar.
My country.
One might want one's country to be similar in terms of core values and way of life when they grow up as when their grandchildren grow up. So, would it be worrying? Would Muslims living in Iraq have reason to be, disgruntled? Oh no, let's not say Iraq. Let's say Jordan. Would Muslims living in Jordan be disgruntled if, as a result of some kind of unforeseen immigration, there was a increasing, Christian secular kind of population in Jordan that suddenly kind of started voting and wanted kind of some aspects in which Islamic law is incorporated into Jordan's legal system. If those kind of Christian immigrants wanted that to be repealed and wanted to go about doing that through a democratic process, would the native Muslim Jordanian population have reason to feel averse to that?
I have no idea. You're asking me about how to situate in Jordan. I don't know.
Well, it's about.
What am I supposed to say? I don't know. I mean, I've never been to Jordan.
I'm asking about the principle, though. Kind of.
What principle are we talking about? What is the principle we're talking about?
So the principle is if you have a group of people living in a country who have some core values, let's call them kind of liberal values, and those values are expressed in the legal system, would those kind of pre-existing kind of citizens of that country have good reason or not be out? It wouldn't be kind of unfair for them to feel worried if kind of adherents to a different religion immigrated and very quickly formed a large enough percentage of the population that they wanted to then vote and incorporate.
But let's say perhaps in simpler language, if I understand you right, you're saying you've got a country and a whole bunch of immigrants come in with a different religion. Would indigenous people feel upset by that?
No, with one extra thing.
Oh, one extra thing.
Would they feel upset if
would they feel upset? How can I possibly know that people would feel upset?
Would it be unreasonable for them to feel upset if those kind of immigrants following Islam did want to vote for a Muslim Brotherhood-like party that wanted to implement Sharia to the legal system to some extent? Because it's about like the
it's a very hypothetical example, and you do with Muslim Brotherhood. I don't. It's such a uniquely configured hypothetical example. I don't know the answer to that. My example, which you've totally changed, I noticed, was that if 40% of the population converted to Islam, So I'm not talking about immigration. I'm talking people like you becoming Muslim. Okay, and then what would happen? And I'm saying you would see evolve, I would hope, a distinctively British form of Islam. I don't mean that Islam is British. I mean that has a particular flavour, a British flavour, because the Sharia has this understanding that when people become Muslim, the culture they've had is to be preserved and honoured and respected, as long as it doesn't clash with direct Sharia principles. So, British culture, English culture would survive and flourish, hopefully, in a system that would see its primary goal as referring to God and not to man-made whims. So, for example, it's a man-made whim that we now want to see two men get married, even though it goes against God's decrees in the Jewish Bible, the New Testament, the Quran, you name it, all traditional religions in the world say this completely goes against the divine will. So in an Islamic society that would never be permitted, although it's permitted by men and women who make up the rules as they go along without any guidance from God. So there are some things that would change. So there wouldn't be gay marriage in Islamic society.
There probably would be maybe freedom of speech either.
Why'd you say that?
Well, like for example, there was a very big adverse reaction towards Salman Rushdie, and there was a big adverse reaction towards the Danish cartoonists. And so,
have you read the Satanic Verses? I haven't.
I haven't either.
I haven't read them either.
I know the synopsis.
I think one of the differences would be, and this is my view, other Muslims may disagree, is that in Islamic society we're not really free to publicly mock the prophets of God. We're not publicly free to insult God himself. I know in this country it's seen as being cool and being somehow educated and sophisticated to denigrate and mock Jesus, Muhammad or whatever. In Islamic society that wouldn't be permitted. So you're right, there would be no freedom of speech there, and I say thank God, because God has his rights. God has his rights to be worshipped without a partner, without partners and associates, and we're not free to mock God publicly. That's not to say we can't privately disagree. If you're Christian, you're not going to agree with Muhammad, prophet of God. So you are free by your very life as a Christian in Islamic society to say, in effect, that Muhammad is not a prophet of God. And that's not a problem. But you can't speak out and say, like I've heard here, not necessarily today, certain people say the most appalling and insulting things about Muhammad. That wouldn't be allowed. And I say that's fine. I don't have a problem.
Can you see that if you were a British person who did value freedom of speech, even to say ideas which you personally found reprehensible, is it ridiculous for someone who does value a freedom of speech and is British to feel concerned about kind of Sharia or Islamic?
You need to give examples. You see, we're talking about here is fear of Sharia. This is kind of the Islamophobic alarm bells. When we talk about specifics here, what is it about the Sharia law that in Britain? I mean, what is it we're talking about specifically?
Specifically, in freedom of speech, if I'm a British person and I value freedom of speech, which I do, is it unreasonable for me to worry about a religious ideology which, if it were implemented into the law, would take away that freedom of speech from me?
But freedom of speech has limits. It's not absolute freedom of speech. Our freedom of speech in this country today is limited in all sorts of ways. I can't publicly libel, I don't know, the Prime Minister, as a libelist. I can't publicly be racist and shout, I'm supposed to be able to do that, and shout racist abuse in public because I could be prosecuted. There are lots of things I can't do now, even in Speaker's Corner, theoretically, because they would break the law. I'm saying that, in my view, in Islamic society, we would extend that protection to the most honoured names of all, which is the name of God, the name of His prophets and messengers. Now, that does curtail freedom of speech, but in the service of a higher purpose, which is not to insult and denigrate God and His prophets. That's not the same, however, as having serious intellectual disagreement. In Islamic society, Christians, by their very existence, testify to their belief that Muhammad is not prophet of God. By their very existence, by definition. But that is permitted in Islam. Within Islamic society are permitted people who, by their very existence, testify against Islam. Christians and Jews, So they're allowed. But if anyone was to do, and people in history have done this, in Cordoba, in Islamic Spain, in the 9th or 10th centuries, and they were like J. Smith, they were fanatics, okay? They hated Islam, and they sought martyrdom. And what they did, apparently, they went to Cordoba in Islamic Spain, and they went to the public square, and they insulted the Prophet. They called him a son of a whatever, they called him a this, and they called him a that, with the express intention of becoming martyrs, knowing the Islamic law. So they were taken to a judge. The judge says, "Why are you doing this? Why are you behaving like this?" And he just told them to go away. But what happened was they kept on being arrested and thrown and told to stop it over and over again. And ultimately, they got their wish. Now, I would say that was suicide.
Yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't call that not an honourable thing. If I constantly, attempt to kill the Prime Minister, someone ultimately is going to shoot me. It's going to happen. Right, so they deliberately provoked and used the system to make them martyrs because that's what they wanted.
Yeah, I don't mind if you personally feel like it would be okay to imprison or kind of kill someone who mocked a religious figure, but I just wanted to check whether because you kind of painted a picture of it being ridiculous to be worried about Sharia or Islamization.
It is, because there's nothing to fear in the divine law that Muslims want to live their lives by. It's for them to live their lives by in Britain. Sharia is not for, in this country, it's not now, it's not for Christians or non-Muslims, it's just for Muslims who want to marry according to God's rules, according to the Quran, and divorce and inheritance, want to pray, give charity, whatever, they want to do it according to God's law, God's rules, to please God. And that's cool.
Okay,
nothing wrong with that.
So maybe it's not correct to call this punishment for blasphemy part of Sharia law, but in effect it's
there is a punishment for blasphemy in Sharia, but in Islamic society.
Yeah, so we could call it like, an Islamic effect on society if if blasphemy did become.
Do you believe it's okay to utter racist speech in public now? Today?
If I'd prefer if we had America's freedom of speech. Yeah.
Okay. So is that a yes or a no?
Yeah. I think in America's freedom of speech, you can say the only real exceptions are fire in a cinema and some types of libel, and you can't follow someone shouting at them. That would be harassment.
But to use the British example, because we're British and we're
yeah. But if you're asking me what kind of freedom of speech I want, I prefer America's.
That's fine. But I don't. I prefer the British model.
Okay.
So I'm saying that if I was to get up on that platform and shout racist abuse at people, ultimately I would get arrested.
Yeah.
And I'd be prosecuted. Now that would be an infringement on my freedom of speech. Yeah. It would be, sort of. But who cares? Who cares?
Well,
I don't care because you can't. Because what you're doing is you're insulting and reviling. You're stirring up hatred, and we believe in the value of social harmony and social cohesion, and people not to be attacked verbally for their faith or their appearance. I think that's a reasonable position to have, and that's very similar to the Islamic position. Except we do bring in God and his prophets because they are reality as well. We live in a secular society where we can insult Muhammad, insult Jesus, and everyone goes, "Ha, isn't that sophisticated?" That's freedom of speech. Not in Islam, it is. I'm sorry, it just is.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't sugarcoat that. It's not permitted.
Yeah. I just wanted. I wanted like kind of British people to hear that as well.
I'm a British person.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I wanted British people who aren't Muslim to hear that as well.
But you see, in generations past, in this country, that rule apply.
Yeah, there was blasphemy.
In Victorian England, there were blasphemy laws.
Yeah, but it's good that like lots of people would see us as progress, that we don't murder people.
I would see that as a culture and a civilization that is going to the dogs. Because no longer do we respect what is honourable and good and true and religious. We now have this. It's called satire and comedy, where we denigrate what is true and the good and the beautiful and religious. And that for me is a society that is going downhill, that is becoming corrupt, has become corrupted. I mean, we see this with gay marriage recently. There was a Tory MP who was sacked, or he resigned, because he spoke against homosexuality. And then there was Tim Farron, the leader of the Lib Dems, who was bullied day after day by the media by the BBC, by Channel 4, by Sky News. I saw it, Do you believe gay sex is a sin? And he said, "Oh, it's my view." He couldn't have a private opinion. And in the end, he gave in, I think, to the demands of the media. And he said, "Oh, no, it's not a sin." Because he wants power. He's a Liberal Democrat leader. This is how our society works now. There's not real freedom of speech on many issues because you're not allowed to speak out. You are harassed and you're by the media who will push you, and if you say the wrong thing, they will crucify you.
Okay,
and there's no freedom of speech.
It's one thing to like kind of have your job opportunities rescinded, but it's like it's probably worse to be kind of killed.
What about free speech, though? We're talking about free speech. There is no free speech when it comes to homosexuality anymore. You've got to toe the line, or you are prosecuted. You can lose your job. You can be vilified. You can be attacked.
Yeah, and I'd prefer American freedom of speech as well. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for that. Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
What's your name again?
Jamie.
Jamie.
What was yours?
Paul.
Yeah. Good.
Cheers.